and ask the next team some more questions. Come
Vortex sensor. I'm Mikey Shullock.
Lauck. I'm Higgs.
Weitzel.
Zack Metz. And our advisor is Dr. Razavi.
Alright, so beginning, we're going to show you the biology, where we got our idea from. This is a current detection mechanism, how we can apply a harbor seal's whisker to create a passive vortex sensor. We'll give you the problem statement, design criteria, how we created our model, what it cost, testing our model, and then what we concluded from our testing. So our introduction, like Mike said, is proposed by Dr. Razavi. It was inspired by Dr. Beam's doctoral dissertation at MIT. And we also reviewed articles from UVA and the University of Rostock.
Just a little bit of biology, kind of where we got the idea from, where it comes from. It actually comes from a seal's whisker, which in this case our specific case, a harbor seal. Harbor seals have a very unique ability to track prey underwater. They actually don't need to see or hear an object or a fish or whatever they need to track without, they don't need to see it. They use their whiskers actually, which can basically, with that and the nerve in their cheek, can actually track prey from underwater without actually seeing it. So what they do is they can track vortices that are left behind. Vortex essentially is a swirling motion that's caused by that separation of fluid from a body, whether an object of any kind, whether it be a fish or a submarine or anything like that. And they can track these vortices that are left behind, and the whiskers actually can understand where they are, how far they are, how big the object is, and they can instantly figure out whether or not they want to attack this prey.
So there was actually a study done at the University of Rostock where there's a predator and a prey. Predator is a seal, prey is it's supposed to be a fish, but in this instance it was a toy submarine. So they put the submarine in the water, which was a fish. It took 30 seconds to lap around the pool. After that 30 seconds has elapsed, they put the seal in the pool. The only catch is they blindfolded it and earmuffed it. Even without those two senses, you can see via the yellow and red lines, the paths are almost identical. That shows the unique tracking ability of the seals.
So today's current detection methods is active sonar and passive sonar. Active sonar involves sending out a sonic pulse underwater and then listening to how it bounces back. This is kind of like being in a dark room and shining a flashlight to find someone. You might be able to find them, but they'll also be able to find you. A solution to that is passive sonar, which is strictly listening for noise made by an engine or propeller. This is in the case of submarines, but that's strictly listening. So if the signal is too weak, you might not be able to detect whoever you're trying to find. Our sensor is considered passive because it's following residual vortices that are left in the water, but it's more efficient and better than passive sonar, and it's better than active sonar because you cannot be detected trying to find your target. And just some applications to this is naval warfare. This can be mounted on like your submarine if you're trying to track or hunt enemy submarines, or it can be mounted on torpedoes. It can be used in finding and studying hydrothermal vents and how the vortices that they throw off affect the water around them, and research of marine life, tracking and finding large fish or mammals such as whales to study them.
So the problem statement for our group is to design and build a whisker-inspired sensor to detect disturbances in the surrounding environment. Design criteria. So we had parameters that we had to follow for this project. The first one was to use a model of harbor seal's whisker to detect disturbances. As you can tell from right here, this is our whisker. Next, we wanted to contain electronics in a watertight housing. Sneak peek, we struggled with that a little bit. We wanted to be resourceful in time management, and above all else, we want to be efficient with all the resources that were provided to us by Wilkes University.
So these images were taken by the study done at MIT. It highlights the benefits of the special geometry that seal whiskers have in comparison to perfect cylinders. And so you have the seal whisker on the right-hand side, at seal whisker model created by Dr. Beam at MIT in comparison to a perfect cylinder of the same length. Both of these models were run through a tank of stationary water, and as they moved, they released a red dye to better visualize the wave pattern left behind them. As you can see, the cylinder oscillates back and forth much more so than the whisker model does. And if a seal were to actually have cylindrical whiskers, they would be detecting the disturbances created by their own movement. But instead, their whiskers move much more smoothly through the water and are not detecting their own movement, and therefore are available to detect movement created by outside forces. So this test, we did perform using ANSYS to simulate the same test Dr. Beam did at MIT. Each of the arrows in the images represent a velocity vector of a particle of water. And so it's all the purpose of the whisker geometry is all to minimize the drag force acting upon the whisker as it moves through the water. And you can see in the upper image, the perfect cylindrical model creates much greater displacement of water, whereas the whisker model moves much more smoothly and does not displace the water as much. So this is our whisker model. It is based on the average geometry of an actual harbor seal whisker. It is just scaled up. It's approximately 10 inches long if you pick that length to maximize the space available to us in the 3D printers here at Wilkes. We wanted to make it as big as we could within that space in order to maximize the strains that we would be measuring. Water pushing against one end of a longer whisker will therefore create a greater movement and thus a greater strain at the opposite end.
So going a little more into the model geometry. So there's two elliptical cross sections that are offset by different inclination angles. In the figure to the right, the inclination angles are alpha and beta. They're perpendicular to the z-axis. The angles are 15.27 and 17.6 respectively. And there's a distance between them of m, which is half the period of undulation. This allows for the minimization of creating its own vortex instead of using a cylindrical item. So going into how the whisker model actually works, it's secured to a base plate, and on that base plate is a flex plate. When the model is dragged through the water acts such as the orange arrows that you can see on the figure, which created the deflection. The model is not bending. What is actually bending is the flex plate, and on that our circuitry, and we can read through the fidget bridge what outputs we're getting. We showed that the max deflection on our whisker model will be about a third of an inch.
So this was our original sensor design. It didn't work too well. We had these inserts in the wall here, and it caused problems lining up holes, so we had to come up with a new design. So instead we eliminated the inserts and came up with a flat plate, which allowed easier machining and locating holes. It also hold down our flex plate a lot easier and stronger.
So the biggest takeaway from that design change was accuracy. Accuracy of the hole, accuracy of the data after we actually acquired it. With the mill, machining was much too hard for us to do here at Wilkes, so that's why we outsourced and did water jet for the bolts. And with that, you improve the quality of our project, but we also have to pay more, so checks and balances.
So in order to measure our data, we mounted strain gauges onto each of the four arms of the flex plate. We're able to measure strain in two different axes. And so there is one Wheatstone bridge used for each axis. The gauges on the same axes, A and C, and on the other hand, B and D, each are used in one bridge. You can see on the right-hand side, you have the sample circuit that we used. On one half of the bridge, you have two 120 ohm resistors, where on the other half, you have the variable resistors as provided by the strain gauges. And so we're measuring the voltage from the points S plus and S minus, and as water pushes on the end of the whisker, you see a slight bend within the flex plate, and that bend creates therefore strain, and strain changes resistance. So as resistance changes, the voltage that we are measuring across the Weitzel bridge will change.
This is kind of model you see on the left here, that is our actual vendor bridge, as we mentioned earlier. That is what basically allows us to look at data and track our data. On the right here, basically the same circuit that we just showed in the previous slide, except for in the yellow you have the Weitzel, or you have the fidget bridge, and the left is the Weitzel bridge. Basically, just have two of those. It's one per axis, one for two strain gauges going each one. So the axis, then from the fidget bridge, we basically, when we bought it, our website comes with specific modules we can use in Python programming, and allows us to set our gain and our sampling rate, which as you can see, our gain was 1, the sampling rate was 10 samples per second, but that can be changed to kind of make it easier to get more data and more accurate data. So what else they did was they allowed us to put all of our data directly into an Excel file. And from that Excel file, we can actually create graphs, which you'll see later, but the graphs were here. But from the problem with it, the small problem we have with it is that the fidget bridge gave us a voltage ratio output. That was the only output we could get out of it. So that's kind of hard to read or hard to understand. So what we were able to do is find a conversion to strain, which as you can see on the right, a little darker there. We have this 4 millivolts per volt as the actual ratio that we're given. That's just right from the fidget bridge. And multiplied by 1/k. K is just our gauge factor, which for us is 2.1, and B is the bridge factor, which for us, since we have a half bridge, it was 2.
So how do we determine like an operating velocity for our sensor? We had to do the flow simulations to find the drag force, and then from that we applied it to just like a basic model of our design to find strain in each of the arms. We were looking for about 250 microstrain where we were applying our strain gauges, and we found that 5 feet per second was the base operating velocity.
So our total cost, total raw cost was just over $1,000. This was mostly due to the fact that in order to use Stevens Institute of Technology to use their facilities, mainly their tow tank, they asked for a small donation of $500. So that was the aspect of our project that ate up most of the cost. Some of the other costs for the fidget bridge, that, like my colleague said, was the component of our project that handled the data. Don's Machine Shop, who did use the water jet, that cost I think $90, $75, yeah. And the 3D printing was just below that at $53 for our model. Our testing, like I said, was done at Stevens Institute of Technology. We needed to use their tow tank because we couldn't find one closer than that. We used different speeds to establish a baseline. We did the whisker alone at 3 feet per second, 5 feet per second, and 7 feet per second. And after that, we put the PVC pipe in front of the whisker and tested it at 2 and 3 feet per second. And this is just a video of our whisker moving through the water on the right here. On the left, we have the setup with no PVC pipe in front of it. It's just the whisker. Above, I don't think it's in that picture, but above that we had JT's laptop strapped to the apparatus to record data. And to the left here, well, yeah, to the left, I believe, is the positive x-axis. That is the direction it's moving. And then we were mainly interested in the motion in the y direction, because that is the direction that different vibrations and different oscillations will be detected.
So we did speed test results at 3 to 7 feet per second in increments of 1 feet per second. And what we tested was specifically the whisker alone, using the PVC for the object detection. So as you can see in the Y strain, which is located in blue, it has a consistent average strain, which is shown to be around 25 microstrain. just under 50 for all tested velocities through 3 through 7. And then the amplitude for the Y strain drastically changes from 3 feet to 7 feet, where it's around 50 microstrain up to 100 microstrain for 7. And then for the x-axis strain, it shows a predictable pattern for the average strain from 3 to 5 feet per second when it rises in understandable increments, but then decreases at 6 to 7, which we believe should have been continuously increasing for all of them. However, the amplitude shows to be pretty consistent throughout when in the x-axis, which shows the oscillations. They should be pretty small and they're consistent. So moving to our drag force, Steve is to provide us with a drag force measurements, which we compared to our data, our tests, and the only variable we didn't consider in our theoretical was the surface roughness. Adding surface roughness would bring these measurements much closer together.
So the next major component of our testing was object detection. For that, the original runs, we ran this whisker model through the water without anything in front of it before. Excuse me. For the object detection, we mounted PVC pipes of 3 different diameters, a fixed distance from the whisker, and those different diameters create different size vortexes in their wake for the whisker to measure. The volume carbon vortex is the kind of wake pattern left behind a cylinder moving through fluid. As I touched on earlier with the comparison of the cylindrical model to the whisker model, the cylinder oscillates much more so as it moves through the water, and we want to utilize that in this scenario to create different wake patterns for the whisker to measure. And here we have just the sample video of our whisker moving through the water following the pipe. You can see the wake pattern left behind the pipe. This varied with different size pipes. We used 1, 2, and 3 inch diameters to create different size wakes.
As Mikey mentioned earlier, this was kind of a little snag we ran into, where about halfway through our testing, we were testing a 1 inch diameter pipe in front of the whisker moving at 7 feet per second. As you can see there, not only did water drip into our housing, it actually completely waterfalled and drenched our entire apparatus. So that was kind of a big issue for us. That kind of took away a lot of time. We had to go through at least 3 or 4 more runs to figure out if it was actually still working or if we needed to change something. But luckily for us, we came prepared with extra flex plates, and we were able to take more flex plates and just replace the one we had. And once we replaced it, we did more runs and we got better numbers.
So these are our results from varying the speed of the objects. So we have 2 inch diameter at 2 feet per second, and then 2 inch diameter at 3 feet per second. You can see it's a lot different than our speed test. You can see that in the Y screen, there are induced vibrations from that on-carbon street vortex. And in our, you can see an increase in the amplitude as we increase the speed. So that's kind of what we're expecting. You can also see that in the x-axis. You can see that it increases when it increases with the speed, which is what we expect also. Then when we varied our object size, so we had our 1 inch diameter on the left there and then 2 inch on the right, and they were both at 3 feet per second. You can see that in the X, which is orange, it stays the same, which means that's what we expected, because it's the same speed. And then you can see that the amplitude are about the same, but they're shifted down a little bit, which means the average strain is a little bit higher when you increase the diameter.
So, future improvements. First thing that we want to do was waterproof the system. That way we don't drain it again, or drench it again rather. Next, our power source might have been an issue. So our power source for the project was JT's laptop, that being a 5-volt supply. So our measurements are small, and any small changes in that power supply could result in noise, and that leads to faulty data. The next thing that we want to do was better mechanical and electrical components. I think it goes without saying, if we have more money, better product. Future testing, we want to do variable testing at different lengths with PVC pipe. Just arbitrary lengths at this point. And with that, we want to do variable speeds at those lengths. So with that, we would have a matrix of new testing procedures that we need to do. We wanted to improve the program for actually plotting. We didn't have enough time, per se, but if we could actually have it moving through the system in the tow tank with lock body, it'll be a lot easier for us to tamper with data. And if we want to understand the effect of the resistance of the EPDM rubber and the plastic deformation and strain gauges in the rubber seal. We want to give a special thanks to Dr. Razavi, our advisor, Ms. Lisa Colaviti, Mr. Mitch Adams, Don's Machine Shop, Stevens Institute of Technology, and Dr. Edward Bednarz. Thank you.
Does anyone answer that?
Okay, no.
Yeah.
How does your model differ from the MIT model that you talked about today?
So this is what Heather Beam created. Her inserts are actually rotary for two of them, so it eliminates an extra torsional strain. While we were having trouble with slipping because of how we milled our flex plate, we decided to go with more sturdy so that the housing sits on top of it, and around it we can just bolt down the flex plate instead of kind of sliding and locking it in that way.
Because with the original design, with the milling, the flex plate, one arm would bow, and the other would bow on the other side, so there was a difference in compression and tension for the strain gauges.
I do have a comment. When Zack mentioned the $500, I just want to mention that it's actually very expensive to run those basins. And they did do us a great favor for us to use that with only $500. It's indeed just a donation, because if it's commercial, they would charge like almost 100 times more expensive. Those are it's very expensive to maintain such a facility. There are only a few in this entire country that you have this kind of facility. So it's actually that's very true. So anybody just summarize your finding in one sentence for me, please, because that's what lost. It's great work. It's a very difficult project. But I'm trying to understand is what actually is your finding. And you did all the experiments. By the way, are those data collected by their facility or by your equipment? By yours, right?
The one thing they didn't collect was the direct.
I see. So those were collected at 10 hertz, you mentioned?
Yeah, there's 10 samples per
10 hertz, right?
Yeah.
Anybody could help me understand why do you choose 10 hertz as sampling frequency?
For the programming, if we choose the higher rate, the program couldn't keep up and we couldn't figure out really how to make it work.
I guess my question is, would that be sufficient for you to find the kind of characteristics you're looking for?
Yeah, we have more like higher sampling rate, we probably get some more clear results.
Okay. Okay, so get back to my original questions. One sentence, so summarize your findings.
We were able to tell if there was an object in front of our sensor.
So it's mainly objective detection.
So
So-
you can see a difference between our speed test results, which is the whisker alone, versus our object detection graphs.
Can I add something? To follow up with Dr. Zuz, I know that you are going to graduate with probably run away, since you're not going to work on this project anymore. But for whoever who is interested in this project, the size of the cylinder in front of the model whisker, the diameter as well as the velocity, has an effect on the frequency of the vortex that it sheds on the whisker. So these guys have a lot of good data. The next step is to analyze data. One thing you could do is to apply a FFT function, like in MATLAB, a Fourier transform, and find the frequency based on the size of the cylinder at the distance of the cylinder from your model as well as the velocity, and then try to kind of calibrate your whisker. The next step is that, knowing an object is in front of the whisker is one thing, knowing what is the size of the object, what is the speed of the object, what is the direction of the object, that's something else. That's a lot of more information you could get from the data you have. I tried to say one sentence for each of you guys.
All right, so one last question, kind of a follow-up of all the other questions. You spent 8 months on the project, $1,000. Yeah, how do you think you advanced the research from MIT? Do you think your sensor design was the major improvement then? Or do you think,
We're just trying to catch up to where they were.
Well,
We were shooting for the stars in the beginning. We thought we'd get multi-dimensional 3D, and then we realized, oh crap, this is hard. So we tried to scale it down a little bit, and like Dr. Mari was saying, if we had more time at the testing facilities, calibration would have been the best thing for us at the time.
well, yeah, we improved the design for ourselves, because we tried to go off of what Heather Beam did. We couldn't get that rotational torsion to, happen. We did attempt it with the inserts. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, so we improved upon that, just completely eliminating the torsion by implementing our new design. And then we actually compared our values to hers, and they were pretty similar. So we can say that we were on par.
Just one quick comment. So those data are really precious. So if you polish them carefully, it might be publishable. It's really good work. I mean, that's why my opinion is that I'm afraid that you guys didn't dig enough, like try to draw a more like a plausible conclusion. So if you dig a little bit deeper, you might yield some very interesting, really like a scientific finding, interesting results. So that's just my comment. Very good job.
thank you.